Good afternoon, YouTube. So I'm beginning to put the plywood stiffeners around the opening for this access hatch here. This is the one for the passenger side. So I learned a few little tricks, I think, that make it a lot easier. The one thing you need to do is put this bottom piece on first. I've got these strips of plywood that are 1 inch wide, and I have it overhanging the opening by about 3/8 of an inch here to contact the access hatch, give it a recess to fit into. What's left here is like 5/8 of an inch. And then this side I have a slightly wider piece of plywood. I've marked where these sort of hinge pieces are, and I've ground those back, given them a bevel on the inside, so to speak. So there's 2 of those places that have that bevel. And what I've found is, if you then get the door or the access hatch basically centered in this opening here and push it pretty much clear to the top, you still want it a little bit loose, but you want these hinge pieces here pushed up as far as you can and equally on both sides, so that way the access hatch pivots. But then the trick is, if you push it up all the way and then you need to make a slight adjustment, all you need to do is file down the thin edge of that bevel. If this side is too high and you need to get the door a little more square in the opening, you just have to file a little bit off of the top of this bevel here, or file a little off the top of that one, and you can get the access hatch to center. Because it's really hard to get everything in place and get it just perfect. So if you push it all the way to the top, once the glue dries on the plywood, I'll probably put a few staples along there. At the end, after I put the other pieces around, then I can come and file this off if I need to, just to get the door square in the opening. And what I find is, if you put the top one on next, you need to get this clearance here over the latch mechanism. It sort of sticks out here, so that's sort of the next critical piece. So you probably want to get this one in, get the 2 parallel to each other and pretty much centered up there, and then I'm going to come back and then I'll cut and fit this side and then cut and fit that side in there. So I don't cut those to length until I know how much room I have, and then those will be basically set over like that. And then you can see right here there's an extra hole, so I'm going to just glue an extra piece on there so I can drill the hole through. There's another hole, let's see if I can find it here. If you can see where my finger is down there, I've got a hole through here that I can put another threaded insert down in this corner, so my thumb is right over where the hole is. And then the whole thing, you can see how I've beveled off that edge. You need that clearance because the body or the back of the bed is kind of curved. That's why I have it set back a little bit like that. So you've got the clearance all along there. This piece up here ends up getting beveled. With the 1/4 inch plywood, there's still about a 3/8 inch gap. It's a little more than a 1/4 inch. So I got a piece of pallet wood here. I think this is some oak, and it was probably 1/2 inch, 7/16 thick. I put a bevel on that side and then a little bit of a groove in there, and now you can see that'll go in like that. So when you swing the lever or the latch up here, it'll ride up that bevel and then fall into that slight notch there. So that's going to work for that. What I want to do is have it tight enough that it will compress the weather stripping around this door. This was, I think, the passenger side door, and I hadn't really paid attention to it, but one of the problems I noticed was one of these plastic pieces had broken off. This one's still intact, but this one had broken off. So like I said, I hadn't really looked at this one since I took it out of the truck, And this one I haven't cleaned up. You can see how dirty it is. And then this is the factory weather stripping, and you can see it's just crumbling. So what I need to do is get this out of here. Anyway, to fix this plastic bit, what I did was I got another little scrap of my pallet wood. You can see it's kind of angled on the back, so I just filed or shaved it down so it was that angle on the back side to fit into that little recess there, and then dropped it down. Yeah, I'll probably put a little bit of a bevel on the underside there, but I've got it so it's a pretty tight fit in there, and I'll probably just epoxy that in place. So yeah, I gotta clean this one up. Yeah, just to show you here the other little details. This hole here is for the threaded insert that I'm going to put into the bottom corner here of the sheet metal. So there's a threaded insert that'll be right where my finger is, and then a bolt will go through there. So that one is about ½ an inch back from the inside face of the plywood. So that needs to be built up 2 layers of plywood. And then over here, this is the threaded insert that's in this vertical stiffener, and that sits about ½ inch back, so I just added a piece of plywood in there and drilled a hole. Trying to restore all these things, but I'll keep the hatches, replace the side panel, and then this will be a nice solid wood panel, and it's going to be screwed to the side of the bed. So it's going to be really solid. It won't rattle or squeak or anything. So this is the driver's side bedside panel in my 4Runner. So I think I finally have the plywood fit into place. It took quite a bit of work. I had to do some scribing along the wheel well here to get it to clear. I want to have a slight gap between the plywood and the sheet metal down there, so if there's any motion it doesn't squeak and vibrate and rattle. So I have like a small gap along the bottom there. Yeah, and then back along here I had to do some fitting of the plywood to the curved side of the back of the bed there, because the sheet metal here sort of has a curve to it. So I had to kind of bevel the back side of the plywood back, and then also slightly scribe it down there. So it used to be straight down, but now there's a slight little curve to it, but that fits up tight now. And you can see here I've got a hole drilled, and there's a hole in the sheet metal back there, so I need to drill out that sheet metal hole and put a threaded insert in there, and then that way I can get an extra screw down there to support that bottom side. The factory plastic panel I think had a couple of spring clips there on the bottom for support, but the plywood of course is just hanging there, so I'll have the bolt right there, and then there's one right here, and then up above there'll be 2 more up there. And then you can see I've got this hole over here, and that's for my deck light switch. So I made this 3D printed housing for the deck light. And then you've got the connector for that. We'll go through the hole right there. So I'll probably have the deck light switch right about there, and then those wires can plug into those wires which go to my overhead light, and that way the switch is right there in the back, so I can just reach in to the back of the 4Runner, flip the switch on, and the light will come on. And again, this light can also be controlled by the deck light switch on the dash. And I've got the access hatch here. You can see it's nice and rattle free, and it pops down like that. But yeah, that really snugs up tight, because you can pop the thing in there, and then I have the latch for the hatch closes snugly. Yeah, so that's all going to get painted the same color, so everything will blend in. I think it's looking pretty good. Now the only 2 things I have left on this side, I need to mark out for an opening here. I want to cut out a door panel in this area so that I can get to this storage space back here. There's the full depth of the side of the bed from here all the way forward up to that storage cubby up there. And then you can see on this side I have a rectangle marked out there in pencil, and that's actually going to be for the inverter cutout on the passenger side panel. Originally I was going to use this panel on the passenger side, but I decided to move it over to the driver's side because this is the nicer surface of the plywood. Yeah, it's coming along, but yeah, quite a bit of fiddling here. So there's my deck light housing. So these stiffener pieces do two things. One is they stiffen up and strengthen this opening here because I've got a pretty thin piece of plywood down there and a fairly thin piece down here, and there's no strength to that. So by doubling up the thickness here, I've strengthened this cutout, but then it also provides a place for the hatch or the door over here to drop into so it's flush. This will probably be my door cutout right here. So I've got about a 6-inch wide piece. It'll come over here and then something down here. Yeah, so I'll probably use the piece of plywood I cut out of there. So the opening will probably come over to that point because that's as wide as the plywood is. So I want to make this opening as big as I can so I can get things in and out of here. But I'm kind of limited because there's sheet metal down here, there's sheet metal over here, and then there's sheet metal along the top, and then you've got the roll bar over here. So you can only make the door so big or make the opening so big before you get into other stuff back there. So yeah, I just thought I'd show you the details on the plywood. It's actually quite a bit more complicated than it looks like. You know, when I first started, it's like, oh, just a piece of plywood, couple of holes, and I'm done. But then you start looking at how do you get this hatch to fit in there, and the problem is the side of the sheet metal is not in the same plane. It's actually like down here, this part is out, but then it curves back, and so this part here is like a 1/4 inch farther back than it is up here. And then the same thing over here, this is flush, but that side down there, it's a 1/2 inch back, so the sheet metal comes down and curves. So I guess I've got to the point where this plywood panel can replace the functionality of the original plastic panel, but now I need to add some features to it beyond what the plastic panel had. Adding this 3D printed housing here makes this a lot more functional. It gets the light up higher, so it's not behind the roll bar where it used to be, but it's up here, and then you can get to the switch easier because the switch is up high. I think I've been working on this about 6 or 7 months already, just here and there when I get time. It's kind of a slow project, but getting towards the end, and then that'll be nice. Get them finished, painted, installed, and then I never have to mess with these again. So anyway, I thought I'd show you that updated work in progress. We're getting there, so yeah, basically functionally equivalent to the plastic panel now. And I just have a bit more work to do, and then we'll get them wrapped up, and I'll show you what the final product looks like when I get to that stage. So stay tuned, and as always, thanks for watching.